describe image templates. In this session, we'll look at some very good templates that you can use for describe image questions. In your PT exam, you will get images of different types. You might get a graph, then you might get a chart, a table, etc. So the templates that we are going to look at, they've also been designed according to the image type. So you'll find templates for tables, for graphs, for photos, for diagrams, etc. The templates are helpful if, for those who struggle to form a response quickly by following the usual method. But I strongly recommend that if you are aiming for a very good score, for a high score, a top score, then just go step by step. Don't depend too much upon these templates. But yeah, if you're looking at an average to a medium level score, then the templates can be useful for you. Also, you have to be careful when you're using templates. See, template by definition, it means something which is generic. It's supposed to fit questions of all types. So you will learn one template for a bar graph, and then the assumption is that whatever type of bar graph you get in the exam, you can use the same template. So it works. It works to some extent, but just like when you buy clothes, so if you buy a large t-shirt, it can fit everybody in the family, but it will not fit anybody perfectly. So if you want a perfect fit, then it has to be according to the person. The same is the case with templates. So use them, but use them with some common sense, use them carefully. And as far as possible, use these as some ideas or take these as a guidance for structure to understand the pattern in which you can form the responses. Let's begin now. First, what we will look at the templates that we can use for a bar graph. So this is what a bar graph looks like. The template that we suggest, so you say the given bar graph compares and then try to put the theme of the graph there. It is clearly evident that, and after that, the key point 1. In comparison, key point 2. What stands out is key point 3. And finally, the conclusion sentence. It can be concluded from the graph that, and you make a general conclusion. So this is a good template, but yeah, this is specific. This is designed to capture as much as content as possible, relevant content. So an example related to this question, the given bar graph compares the popularity of various colors among children. Okay, so the template is there, but this template, it still expects that you are able to understand what the image is, you are able to form at least some sentences. So, for example, by looking at favorite color and children, you formed this particular part of the sentence, popularity of various colors among children. And then it is clearly evident that yellow is the favorite of largest number of children. In comparison, only 5 like green. What stands out is that all other colors are liked by 6 to 8 children. It can be concluded from the graph that, and a general conclusion, that children prefer a wide range of colors. So this is a good template, it's a good structure. And if you are able to pick out the key points and understand them correctly and then put them, then this will get you full marks. But let's say you don't think that you'll be able to do this, then here's a simpler template for you. The bar graph is about, and then just read the title or labels. It shows any points. It also tells us about, then read other points. In conclusion, the graph represents a consolidated and precise view of, and you put a title there. So an example, the bar graph is about favorite colors and children. So now you see, now you are just picking what's there on the screen. Now we are not expecting you to combine these two to form something like the popularity of various colors among children. So you're just reading favorite colors and children. And then it shows colors red, blue, green, yellow, and pink. It also tells us children number from 0 to 10. In conclusion, the graph presents a consolidated and precise view of children and favorite colors. So you see, this is much simpler. It still contains information that you will read, but it's directly in front of you. So if you're confident, then use the template above. But if not, then you can give a response like this. Let's look at the next type of bar graph. So this is somewhat more complicated than the previous. As you can see in the previous image, you only had a single type of bar. So it was just favorite color versus children. But here you have multiple bars for each of the categories. So for example, for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, you have bars representing different locations: Kent, Lincoln, Mersey, York, etc. So this kind of question then it becomes more complicated because you not only have to cover each location, but you also have to cover each location in each of those quarters. So what you need to speak and what you need to cover, that increases, but overall the template, it remains the same. So you can still say the given bar compares theme. It's clearly evident that key point 1, key point 2, then and what stands out, key point 3, and finally the conclusion. Here's an example. The given bar graph compares the new revenue at various locations from time period 2020 quarter 1 to 2020 quarter 4. So as you can see in this case now, earlier, if this was a simple graph, you would have just said the given bar graph compares the new revenue at various locations. But here, another point has been added, so you also have to speak about that. So that in total is the theme of the graph. And now after that, it is clearly evident that Kent has generated most revenue. So you need to find the first key point. So for that, look at something which is the largest, which stands out. So in this case, this bar, the blue bars here, here, and also here, you can say they are the largest. So that means, and they correspond to Kent. So that becomes our first point. It is clearly evident that Kent has generated most new revenue of over 50K in last 3 quarters. In comparison, Lincoln was the leader in first quarter because this is a bit of a difference. Here, it's not the blue is not the tallest. This yellow or the orange, that is the tallest. So that becomes in comparison. And what stands out is that most locations have shown ups and downs throughout the year, as they are all increasing or decreasing. And finally, a conclusion. It can be concluded from the graph that Lincoln is gradually becoming most important for new revenue. And now, these are spoken questions. You will be speaking these, recording these responses. So these parts of the template, the given bar graph compares. It is clearly evident. In comparison, what stands out, it can be concluded. Make sure that you practice speaking these parts, okay, so that you are as fluent and as natural when it comes to speaking at least these parts of the sentences. Now, like the previous, if this was difficult for you, then here's a simple version in which we will just read what is in front of us. So the bar graph is about titles and labels, is about new revenue in Kent, Lincoln, Mersey, and York. It shows, first you read this, as it says here, you read some points, and it also tells us about, you read points on other axis, tells us about point, new revenue amounts ranging from 0 to 50K. And then you just make a conclusion. In conclusion, the graph presents a consolidated and precise view of new revenue at various phases. Now, in case you are giving a response like this, then don't think too much about whether I've covered everything, whether what I've covered is important or not. Because you're already depending on a template. So, as long as you are able to give some response which is relevant to what is there in the image, and then your focus should be on speaking it properly. So, don't put any hesitation in your mind. Just keep it simple. What's in front of you, that is what you should read. So those are the templates that you can use for bar graph. Now let's look at line graphs. These are the type of line graphs. So here the data points, they follow a line. Instead of a bar, you have a line, and the template, the given line graph illustrates, then the theme. The rest of it is similar to the bar graph. I'll give you an example related to this image. The given line graph illustrates the number of donut boxes sold on various days of the week. There's a session that we have where we talk about paraphrasing. So we've done a bit here. So number of donut boxes, I've combined. Instead of saying number of boxes and donuts sold, basically just reading what's in front of me, we have paraphrased, we have flipped it around. And instead of saying Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I've said various days of the week. So if you can do this, that will be considered a better response. And then follow this pattern. It is clearly evident that people buy most donuts on, look at, again, you have to find the key point. The key points are the highest and the lowest. So key point is Friday, 10. You look here and you look here. So Friday, which is about 10 boxes in comparison, you go to the smallest. So 4 and Tuesdays. What stands out is that demand goes up and down throughout the week. It can be concluded from the graph that donuts are popular on most days of the week. Alright, so the conclusion has to be something general. And try to say something which is not directly written in front of you. So now the thing about popularity, etc. is not written, but by noticing that number of boxes are sold on each day, I concluded that it means donuts are popular on most days of the week. Now, this response, it will get you a higher score, but yeah, it'll be a bit difficult to form. So it requires that you understand and then you can paraphrase and formulate your response. If that is difficult, challenging, then here's the simple version. The line graph is about, now you just read the title and labels. Show read points also tells us about, again, first read points here, then read something from here. And then again, a general conclusion statement where you will just repeat the title. Example, the line graph is about donuts sold. Now, first I'll read this. It shows days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It also tells us about number of boxes ranging from 0 to 10. In conclusion, the graph presents a consolidated and precise view of donuts sold, number of boxes, and days of week. We just read in the conclusion also basically the title and the labels that are there. One thing that's important, I'll point it out. When you are giving a response like this, you essentially depending upon what's written in front of you, then try to read as much as possible. So you see, I read Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But here, I haven't spoken about each day individually. Why? Because there's other more relevant, more smarter content to talk about. But in this case, I'm just reading what's in front of me. I haven't been able to come up with anything on my own. That's why to fill the time, I read as much as possible from what is in front of me. All right. So please note that difference. Let's go to the next one now. Now, this is also a line graph, but this is more complicated. So you might get a picture like this. In this graph, there will be more than one lines, each representing something different, but all of them compared against the same X and Y. And they'll be all related to the theme. So the theme here is percentage of total music sales. So music sales, and each of these lines, they represent one particular method of sale, streams, downloads, CDs, but all of them, they have been plotted against the same X and Y. X here, the years, and then the percentage. So first you have to note the trend individually, that how that particular method, it has been increasing or decreasing. And then you also have to do a comparison between the three. So that's why there is an extra complication here compared to the simpler line graph. The template, however, is pretty much the same. The given line graph illustrates the proportion of music sales by various channels such as streams, downloads, and CDs from year 2011 to 2018. Now see, we have paraphrased it a bit. So instead of saying percentage as it is, I've said proportion, and then we have combined the channels, that is the methods, stream, download, and CDs, with the title to form one sentence. Next, it is clearly evident that, so what you have to show, as I said, the first point, the key point in graphs, bar graphs, line graphs, that is the highest. The next key point is the lowest, and then you can note down a trend. So highest here, it is clearly evident that streams have risen sharply from just around 5% in 2011 to over 40% in 2018. Now keep in mind, there's no need to try to find out the exact number. So, for example, in 2018, it's clear that it is above the line for 40. So whether you say 40, 41, 42, it's all the same. So that's why it's just better to say over 40, right? Or approximately 40, around 40. If you try to find out the exact number, it will waste your time and it's not necessary. And then in comparison, CDs that accounted for more than 50% in 2011 are now just over 20% in 2018. And then what stands out is the increase and fall in downloads. Finally, our general conclusion, it can be concluded that streams will soon account for more than half of total sales. Now, let's say you are not able to do this. So let's look at the simple template. The line graph is about, just read the title, is about percentage of total music sales by method. Then it shows, first read one part, just pick something. So we'll pick streams, downloads, and CDs. So it shows streams, downloads, and CDs purchased. And then it also tells us about years from 2011 to 2018 and percentage from 0 to 60. And finally, a very general conclusion in which again we will just use the title. So in conclusion, the graph presents a consolidated and precise view of percentage of total music sales by method. So that's line graph. Now, sometimes it gets even more complicated, you may see a combination of a bar graph and a line graph. And then the template, it changes only a little bit. You can say the given bar and line graph compares. So for example, in this case, the given bar and line graph compares a person's sales in terms of number of units sold and transactions made from month of January to June. The rest of it is pretty much, we have used the same template that we were using for other graphs. Let's look at the simpler version. The given bar and line graph is about my sales, units sold, and total transactions. Now, as I said, if you note, the title here is my sales. So it means this is probably from the perspective of a salesperson who has made the sales. And when you are reporting, ideally you will not say my sales. But since you are using a template, we will not think so much. You will just read what is in front of us. So you say my sales, then read what is here, then read what is here. And it shows months from January to June. It also tells us about transaction amounts, which is here, and numbers of units sold. If you want to keep it even simpler, you could have also said it also tells us about total transactions from $0 to $8,000 and units sold from 0 to 160. That is even more straightforward. In conclusion, the graph presents a consolidated and precise view of my sales, units sold, and total transactions. Just reading what's in front of you, not complicating, not thinking too much. Let's look at the next one, which is a pie chart. So a pie chart looks like this. This whole basically is a pie, like an apple pie, and it's divided into different pieces. So piece of a pie, and it represents something of a whole. Now, this is the template. The given pie chart compares, then theme of the chart. The rest of it is similar to what we used for the graphs. Let's look at an example. The given pie chart compares the population share in 2021 of various countries that form the European Union. So you see how important paraphrasing is. So if you have not studied the session on paraphrasing, I would strongly recommend that you do it as well, because it's very important whether it comes to your spoken responses or your written responses. So that is your first sentence. After that, it's clearly evident that Germany, now here also, the key point is what is the biggest, then what is the smallest. An important point to note, the biggest here is actually the gray part, but that is rest of the EU. That means they've combined everything together. So things like that you always leave for the end. Individually, which is biggest, that should be your key point. So in this case, Germany on its own is biggest. That's why is the key point. So we'll talk about it first. Then remaining is remaining. So even though it shows 25.7, but it's everything combined. So in a way, it's not the biggest point for us. So it is clearly evident that Germany has the highest population of over 18%, followed by France that has over 15%. So this is an example of the linking words, using linking words. So you can club two of these together. In comparison, now look at the smallest ones. So Romania and Netherlands, they have under 5%. So you don't need to read out everything exactly. What stands out is that all the remaining EU countries account for just over a quarter. Over a quarter means over 25%. So make sure that these terms, quarter is 25%, half 50%. So you can use that in your responses. Instead of just saying 25%, you can say a quarter of the whole. And finally, the conclusion, it can be concluded that EU population is concentrated in a few major countries. Now, here's a simpler version. The given pie chart is about, just read this, population of countries of the European Union in 2021 by percentage. Then it shows, and you will put some key points there. So it shows countries such as, just read this, Germany, France, etc., etc. It also tells us about percentages. You read some of these. And then in conclusion, the pie chart presents a consolidated and precise view of population of countries of the EU. All right, simple enough. When using a template, like a simple template like this, then I'm giving a very simple response, a very generic response in terms of content. So I have to do very well in my delivery. So make sure that you do it without hesitation. That's why I always say just focus on what's written in front of you. Don't think, is this the best point? It's fine. Just read something, read anything that is in front of you, but in proper structured sentences like this, and read them without hesitation, in proper pronunciation, and fluently. Let's look at the next template now. So sometimes you will get a combination of a graph and a chart, something like this, and there can be different types of combinations. Let's try to understand with the help of this example. And then is the first sentence mainly that will be different. So you will say the given bar graph and pie chart compare. Now there's something for which this graph is being used to point out, and to point out something else, we are using this chart, right? So that means they are all related to the same theme, but this is one aspect of it and this is second aspect of it. So both of those you have to highlight in the introduction, and then you can whether pick something from here or you can pick something from here. But basically you have to pick a high point, a low point, and then some kind of a trend or something that stands out, and finally make a conclusion. So here's an example. The given bar graph and pie chart compare the total number of boxes of donuts sold on various weekdays and also the relative share of each donut type. So I've covered the number of donuts sold from here and the share of donut types from here. So taken care of both the aspects, and then it is clearly evident that maximum donut sales happen on Friday. In comparison, the least donuts are sold on Tuesday. What stands out? So I've picked up a point from here that all three donut types, they command an equal share. So these three, they look equal. So I've said that they command an equal share. And finally, it can be concluded that donuts of all types are very popular and enjoyed on every day of the week. So in my conclusion also, I've taken care of both these. So I've concluded that donuts of all types comes from here, and every day of the week it comes from here. Let's look at a simple version where we will just read what's in front of us. So the given bar graph and pie chart, that of course you have to identify the type of image that is in front of you. So the given bar graph and pie chart are about donuts sold and types of donuts. And then you just read. So they show days such as Monday and Tuesday and the number of boxes. They also tell us about types such as strawberry, original, and chocolate. In conclusion, the pie chart presents a consolidated and precise view of donuts sold and types of donuts. Again, in this version, the simple version of the template, just focus on reading what's in front of you. Let's look at the next template now, which is for a simple table. A simple table looks like this. Usually you have two columns and then a number of rows, and basically each row links one column to another. For example, here it links the regions with their population growth rate. So this is a simple table. Here's the template. You start with the given table shows, and then it is clearly evident that key point 1 has the highest. So you try to pick something, because in the tables usually there will be some kind of a comparison or a ranking. So you pick the highest, combine these two. So that will be your one key point. Try to pick a row which has the highest point. After that, in comparison, you have to look at something which is the lowest. And then similarly, an outlier or a trend that stands out, that will be your key point. So here's an example. The given table shows the population growth rate of various regions and countries. It's clearly evident that, so I had to pick the highest. Highest is 1.5 for China. So it's clearly evident that China has the highest rate of population growth of 1.5%, followed by other developing countries at 1%. So I decided to combine these two, and you can do that, which is actually good. It will help you to cover more information in one sentence in the time that you have. Then you write a sentence which says in comparison. And here the lowest is this. In comparison, Japan has a 0 rate of growth. What stands out is that all remaining regions are at around 0.5%. So everything 0.5, 0.7, 0.8. So, and this also 0.5. So I just said that everything else is at around 0.5%. So this is very important, the ability to club together, combine points which are similar, to approximate them and combine them in a bunch, which is what we did with remaining regions. And finally, it can be concluded that China is contributing maximum to the world population. Now, here's a simple version of this, and you'll just be reading what's here. So in front of you, what you have: population growth rate, region, the names of the regions, and some numbers. So you start by saying the given table shows population growth rate and regions. Then you just start reading row one by one. It shows United States at 0.5, Japan at this, Australia at this. It also tells us about other OECD at 0.7%, China at 1.5%, and other developing countries at former Soviet Union at 0.5%, and other developing countries at 1%. In conclusion, the table presents a consolidated and precise view of regions and population growth rates. Right? So very simple. Just read each row one by one. Okay. Now the tables, they can get complex. So this is a complex table that you might get. Now here, there'll be number of columns and each row basically is one piece of information, usually about what is there in the first column. So here, this is the annual population growth for each of these Australian states or territories, that's of which are mentioned in the first column. And then the different growth components, that how much is of that growth is natural, how much comes from overseas migration, from interstate migration, how much is the total population growth, etc., etc. So here's the template, and it's very similar to the earlier template, just that when you talk about any particular row, so key point 1 has the highest, it will become a longer sentence for you. Now an example: the given table shows the annual growth in population in various states and territories in Australia. Again, a bit of paraphrasing in the first, and instead of saying that different growth components, I said from several perspectives. Then, the first point, it is clearly evident that New South Wales has the highest natural increase of this migration from overseas and even total population growth and growth on a weekly basis. So see, I combined all these different points. I didn't mention the number for each. It's not important. I mentioned it for one. And then I clubbed it with followed by Victoria. So I tried to cover two rows in one because they are at the top. Then you try to pick the smallest. So in comparison, Tasmania had the smallest natural increase of just 801. So it's a mistake here. It should not be 901. It should be 801. But anyway, this is just an example. A net interstate migration of only 21. What stands out is the negative interstate migration in the top two largest states. So if you are able to pick something like that, which clearly stands out, we're talking about increases, and then in the largest states which have big increases, there is something negative, means there's a decrease. So that stands out, obviously. That's different from the trend. And then it can be concluded that overseas migration, that is actually what's contributing maximum to the overall population growth in Australia. The natural increase is much smaller. The interstate migration is actually negative. So the main population increase, it actually happens by net overseas migration. Now, the simple version, the given table shows, first read this, the given table shows annual population growth components in Australia, states or territories, full stop. Then it shows, just reads anything. It shows natural increase of this in New South Wales, this much in Victoria, this much in Queensland. So you simply read, focus on one column and read it one by one. It also tells us about, then you can cover another column. In conclusion, the table presents a consolidated and precise view of annual population growth components in Australia, states or territories. So see, there's no paraphrasing here. Focus only on reading what's in front of me. So my advice is try to understand these templates properly. If you can, use the first version. If that template doesn't work for you, then only you should use the second template. But make sure that you understand all parts of the template properly, how we are putting information into that template. And even though this is a template, the structure is fixed, but we also paraphrase the titles, we paraphrase how we speak about these things. So next what we have, this is a diagram, and basically there'll be two types of diagrams. This is one diagram which explains a concept. So for example, a diagram on evaporation, on water table, on how clouds are formed, on artificial intelligence, on how computers work. Then there will be another type of diagrams which is about a process. So steps, how something happens, how manufacturing happens, how toys are made, something like that. So this diagram is of the first type. And the way the structure we use, the given diagram illustrates the various components of the theme, because the diagram, it is telling us, if you have studied biology or physics, geography, then you have seen a lot of diagrams in school. And you see they are labeled. That's what we refer to, the various components of the overall theme. Then key point 1 and key point 2 are the most important features. So just pick two that stand out to you, that seem most important to you. Further, we must note key point 3 and then cover another key point. And finally, a conclusion. Here's an example. The given diagram illustrates the various components of artificial intelligence. Then we have to do this key point 1 and key point 2. So we say machine learning, speech, vision, and NLP, expert systems, planning and optimization, and robotics are the most important features. They are highlighted. Further, we must note that areas like machine learning, they are subdivided into predictive analysis and deep learning. And a conclusion, it can be concluded from the diagram that artificial intelligence is a highly specialized field with many areas and subdivisions. So, as far as possible, try to make a smart conclusion, or even if you say it can be concluded from the diagram that artificial intelligence is very complicated, that's also a good enough conclusion. Now, this was a good response to a good template. And now let's look at a simple template. So the given diagram is about, what can you read? Artificial intelligence. It shows us, start reading something. It shows us machine learning, speech, etc., etc. It also tells us about, read something more. Predictive analysis and deep learning, text to speech and speech to text, etc. In conclusion, the diagram presents a consolidated and precise view of artificial intelligence. So that is a simple template. You have options. That's our task. We want to make you as capable as possible to deliver a high scoring response. Now it's up to you to use the one that suits your ability the most. Let's look at the other type of diagram now, which is a process diagram with steps. So this is what it looks like. Usually you will see there'll be some way of indicating how the steps are moving. This arrow tells us that. So starting from here, then goes here. The title usually tells you what the process is about and the different steps, then each of that step is a step in that process. And when you talk about it, it's important that you recognize that it's a process diagram and there are steps involved in it. So you say, something like this, the given process diagram illustrates the various steps in the theme. Then you have to talk about the first step. So the process starts with step 1, which is then followed by, because the steps, they come in a sequence, which is then followed by this, this, this. Talk about 2, 3, 3, 4 steps. Then go to another one, step 4, etc. These are other important parts of the process that finally culminates at, you must talk about the last step. And then a journal conclusion. Let me show you an example. The given process diagram illustrates the various steps in a procurement process. The process starts with needs recognition. So I paraphrased saying that starts with recognizing the needs, which is then followed by purchase requisition, review of request, review and approval. Yeah, so combine these two, review of request and approval. So I combine these two, review and approval, request for quotations, and negotiations are other important parts of the process that finally culminates at record keeping. Now, if you note, I haven't mentioned invoice, three-way matching, receive goods and services, because if there are too many steps, you can't cover all of them. So just pick some that help frame your response. As in our case, we picked a couple from the beginning, then the next few, and then finally we acknowledged the last step. And it can be concluded from the diagram that the process of procurement is very intricate and detailed. So this kind of a statement you can actually make about any process, that the process is process of procurement or process of toy manufacturing, process of assembling electronics is very intricate and detailed. Here's a simple version. The given process diagram is about a procurement process flow diagram. So see, as I said, if we go for the simple version, we'll just read what's in front of us. So ideally, I should have just said the given process diagram is about a procurement process. But we want to avoid all confusion. We want to be very clear. So I just read the whole of it. Even though there's a bit of repetition because I've already said that it's a process diagram. And then again, I'm saying that it's a process flow diagram. But that's fine, because in this version, if we go with this strategy, we're just going to read what's in front of us. And then it shows, start reading a few steps from here. It shows needs recognition, purchase, review of requests, budget approval, and quotation request. It also tells us about negotiation and contract, receive, etc., etc. In conclusion, the diagram presents a consolidated and precise view of procurement process. So we didn't waste any time on paraphrasing in this case, and we also mentioned all the steps here. Though in the previous one, we didn't mention all the steps because our sentences, we had other sentences to talk about. But in this case, just to make sure that we have for 40 seconds, we'll read as much as possible from the diagram. So that's why I mentioned all the steps one by one. So that is your process diagram. You can get either a simple diagram, you can get a process diagram. Who knows, you might even get both types in the exam. Now, let's look at the final type of image for which we will look at the template, and that is a general photo. So sometimes all that you will get is a photo describing a particular scene or a thing in front of you, and you have to talk about it. So this is the template we recommend. The given image shows theme of the image. Then key point 1 is the highlight of the image. equally important is or are. You can talk about another aspect. And then image also shows, you can talk about a couple of other things. And finally, it can be concluded from the image that then make a journal a roundabout statement about the theme of the image again. Example, the given image shows a fire scene. So you can say anything. You can shows a burning building, shows a fire scene. Then key point one is that there's a building that is burning here. So the burning building is the highlight of the image. That is obviously which you immediately notice, the first thing that you notice. And then equally important are the firemen trying to douse the fire. Image also shows some parts of building are already falling down due to the fire damage. It can be concluded from the image that fire probably burned down the whole building. All right. But if you are to take a simple approach, the given image is about a burning building. It shows a red building in flames. It also tells us about the firemen standing next to the building trying to control the fire. In conclusion, the image presents a precise view of a burning building. So you see, when it comes to a photo, the difference is much lesser whether you're using a simple template or a more complex template. But yeah, if you're using the simple version of the template, then you basically just point out the things that are there. So for example, what is there? Red building in flames. Firemen trying to control the fire. Yeah. So that's all. I mean, if you are running out of things to say, you could have even said some firemen in a black uniform and other firemen in a different color uniform. The firemen have yellow hats. So you can also say that. Basically, you just read what's in front of you, that there are some trees behind the building which have also been burnt. Okay. So it's very open-ended when it comes to a general photo. And these are the two ways that you can approach. In this session, we have looked at almost all the types of images that you might come across in PTE Academic. And we have looked at the various approaches that we can take. A template, a sophisticated template, first with a good structure, but that would require you to have the ability to paraphrase, pick correct information and combine it in a grammatically correct form. And then we looked at a simple version of the template, which is just about reading the points that are in front of you. Depending upon what your target score is, if you're aiming for a high score, my advice is go for the first version. If you are okay, you just want an average score, then you can also go with the second template. But if you're going with the second template, then stick to it, keep it simple. Don't try to make very smart responses, because the second template is designed in a way that you will just be reading what is in front of you. And then more effort should be put in your delivery, in your speech, in your fluency, pronunciation, etc.